Hi, I'm Christopher Schwarz, and I'm the author of the book, The Anarchist Tool Chest, which was published in 2011 by Lost Art Press. The Anarchist Tool Chest, it's about a lot of things that have to do with hand tool woodworking, but one of the biggest sections of the book concerns the basic set of hand tools that I think every hand tool woodworker should have. And the book goes into great detail as to why you need each one of these tools, but what it doesn't discuss are brand names. So what we're going to do here today with this short DVD is we're going to root through my tool chest. And I'm going to discuss each one of the 48 or 50 tools that I think are essential, and I'm going to tell you why I picked that particular brand name for my chest. The first plane to talk about is the jack plane, which is without a doubt the most versatile of all the bench planes. I've always preferred vintage Stanleys for my jack planes. I quite like the Stanleys from World War II, but I really like the Stanleys from the early part of the 20th century. This is a Stanley Type 11, which comes from about 1907. And this plane has required a little bit of fix-up. I had to flatten the sole, and I had to tidy up some of the nasty bits on the inside. But once you do that, it's a really versatile tool that can take care of a lot of chores. And so let's get in here a little closer, and I'll show you how that works. The reason I'm totally in love with these early Stanleys is, among other things, that the bed is just all this flat machined casting, which gives a lot of stability to the cutting surface. And what I do with these jack planes is I take the stock cutter and sharpen an 8-inch radius on the stock old cutter. And I use that for rough stock removal. And then I have a second iron and cap iron that I have sharpened with a very slight radius. And I can just drop that in, put the lever cap on, and now I'm set up for jointing and smoothing. So this one plane can handle all your chores if you pick the right plane. All right, here's the plow plane that I use, and this thing is a sex machine. It's worth more than the truck that I first bought when I graduated from college. It's a D.L. Barrett & Sons. It's a handmade wooden plow. Cost me about $1,700. Might be the most expensive tool that I own, but I don't care because I love it dearly. I've always preferred wooden plows over metal plows, and the reason is you can see this escapement here, is the wooden plows, the wooden stock plows, throw the shavings while you're making the groove onto the bench, whereas the metal plows will throw the shavings into your hand while you're holding the tool over here, which is just ridiculous. This plow also is just awesome because it is a bridle plow. And what that means is you just loosen that, you move the fence wherever you want it, and then you turn it and lock it, and there are no problems with parallelism with the fence like you have with the crazy screw arm plows. So one hugely expensive tool, but in my book, completely worth it. You have to have some sort of rabbiting plane in your toolkit. Rabbets are an essential woodworking joint. I think you can go one of two ways. I have this skew rabbet plane from Veritas, a Canadian company, and this is technically a moving Philister plane because it has a nicker up here and a fence that moves. But really, there are very few manufacturers brand new of really good rabbet planes, and this is about the best choice you have if you don't want to find a vintage tool. Your other choice, if you don't want to spend the money on a depth stop and a movable fence and everything, is to use your shoulder plane as a rabbet plane. It doesn't have a fence, it doesn't have a depth stop, it doesn't have a nicker, but it will make basic rabbets. And in the book, The Anarchist Tool Chest, I talk about how to go about doing that. It works, and it's just not as ideal. and it's a money-saving thing. So my preference would be get yourself the Veritas skew rabbet plane, just the right-hand version if you're right-handed, and just the left-hand version if you're left-handed. Don't get both. And if you're going to get a shoulder plane for this, get the 1.25 inch wide large shoulder plane. I prefer the Lie-Nielsen here just because it looks really nice, and I love its beautiful lines. Let's talk about block planes, which actually is one of the most common planes found in toolkits, but the one that a lot of traditional woodworkers really poo-poo on. I love a block plane, and more than that, I love the Lie-Nielsen 60.5 block plane, which is the low angle version, which means it's bedded down here at 12 degrees. I've never found another block plane that is its equal, and that's really saying something because it is a very simple tool. It weighs the right amount, it feels the right weight in your hands and hits your hands in all the right places, and is just a super well-made tool. So without reservation, I'm a big fan of the Lie-Nielsen 60.5. I'm really picky about all the tools in my chest, but I am super picky when it comes to the marking and measuring tools. And the place to start is with your gauges. You need at least one gauge, and you're probably going to want 5 or 6 by the time you really get deep into handwork. And the type marking gauges are hands down my favorite and have been for more than a decade. I really like them because they can be adjusted with one hand, is that you can move the head in and out, you can lock the head with a soft lock, and then you can dial in your final measurement and lock it in, all with one hand. Plus these use a very sharp knife, so they make nice crisp lines, and you can lock the cutter into a recess inside of the head so that it's protected the whole time. Really just a brilliant piece of engineering. But you need more than just one gauge. And the other kind of gauge you really need is a panel gauge. And I'm not super married to the Lie-Nielsen version of the panel gauge, which is what this is. But there are a couple features I like about it that make it a recommendation that I think I can, sort of make for everybody. The panel gauges you need because these make really wide cuts when you need to rip a board. And one of the advantages of the Lie-Nielsen panel gauge is that it has a pencil hole here, so you can use a pencil gauge, which is nice. The other thing is that it locks on the diagonal. As you can see, this is a diamond shaped, and the lock goes down on the diagonal, which keeps the fence registered 90 degrees to the stem, which is a big plus. And then here on the other end of the panel gauge, you can see that it has a nice cutter. You can find a lot of vintage panel gauges. They're really ragged out. Usually the head's going to shift all around, and that's one of the reasons why I went with a brand new one, and this pretty much fits the bill. Let's talk about some of the essential measuring tools that I use in my shop. First up is the 6-inch Starrett combination square with a 4R satin rule. 4R means that there are 4 kinds of measurements on it, and they are all imperial: 8/16, 32nds, and 64. So this side I almost never use. What I love about the Starrett combination square is that it replaces so many other tools in the toolkit is that it's a tri-square, it's a depth gauge. With this 45-degree surface, it can be a bevel square. And if I want, I can even remove the 6-inch rule, and it becomes just a plain old 6-inch rule. I've always liked Starrett's over all the other brands out there because they're just always perfect. I don't know why you would cheap out on one of the most essential pieces of your measuring toolkit. The other tool that I use all the time is a 2-foot rule. And I've never found a new 2-foot rule that I like, so I always buy vintage. This is a Stanley 76. And what is really important about this rule is that the boxwood has this brass binding along it, and this brass binding prevents the wood from warping over time. The other key feature of a good folding rule is that it has some alignment pins, and these are some little pins that stick out from the brass binding and nest into some holes on the other side of the binding and keep the tool aligned, and it keeps the tool more accurate longer. Of course, you also want to make sure that you can read the letters on the boxwood. You can clean that up with some oxalic acid and it'll make it better, but if you can't read the numbers, it's worthless. The third tool is something that I use more at the lumber yard than I use in the shop, and that is a 12-inch tape measure. This is for determining if a board is 6 or 8 inches wide when I'm at the lumber yard, or how many feet long the boards are. It's a Starrett. Am I married to it? Absolutely not. I really like Lufkin too. The reason I have this particular Starrett is because if you look at this tape, which is a 1/2 inch wide, is that it has metric on here right across from the imperial. Sometimes I work overseas and I need to convert metric to imperial really quickly without looking like I'm stupid. And so this tape really helps me do it. Not super accurate. Tapes are not really super accurate, but they are really helpful. Here are my essential dovetailing tools. You have to have a really good knife if you are a hand tool woodworker. It should be one of your first purchases. I really love me this blue spruce marking knife, and it's not just because it's so beautiful. It's because it's also got all the right features for a hand tool woodworker. One, it has this spear point up here, so you can mark dovetails on either side of the tail or the pin really easily just by flipping the knife over. So it's flat on this side and there are bevels on this face. The other thing is that it's very thin. It's a really thin knife, so you can get in between really narrow tail openings. And then the last thing is that it's quite long. And this allows you to get in between Carcass dovetails and into those back corners that other knives, they just leave you short, quite literally. It is very comfortable to hold like a pencil, and of course, it's really nice to look at. The other tool that I'll use for dovetails, especially when laying out slopes, is a sliding bevel, but you are going to use this for a lot of things. This is the Chris Vesper sliding bevel. He's an Australian tool maker, and this thing is based on the St. Johnsbury patent, and it is just unbelievably awesome. It's a butt locking gauge, which means that you lock it at the butt of the tool, and it also has a little screw there for extra screwing power, but you lock it and it's very difficult to move the blade. The other really big advantage of the Vesper bevel is the thickness of the bevel's edge here, which I really like. However, this is a very expensive piece of kit, and not everybody is going to be able to afford a Chris Vesper gauge. And the second choice is to buy a butt locking gauge like from Stanley. Stanley made a number 18, and this is a copy that was made for craftsmen, and I bought this at a flea market for just pennies, and it locks at the butt and is very secure. It's not as thick a blade like you would have on the Chris Vesper, but it is a really solid gauge. So look for a Stanley 18 or some equivalent that locks at the butt. I think Chinois also makes a nice one, a modern one. I mean, it's aluminum and cheesy, doesn't have the nice feel of steel, but it's a good gauge. Well, let's talk about dividers. And I have probably half a dozen dividers at least. The little ones are great for joinery, and these are two of my favorite little tools. And this is a new Starrett, and this is sort of an older Starrett. I'm not really a big fan of the older Starrett. The points aren't as sharp and have never been as close together. This new Starrett, which I bought off of eBay for about 10 bucks, is just perfect. It has needle points. It really just grabs into the work. It locks precisely. It holds its setting, and is just perfectly precise, like all the things they make in Athol, Massachusetts. So get yourself some dividers. You will be very happy. Many of the most important marking and measuring tools in your toolkit should be made from wood, and they should be made by you and not purchased from a store. Key among these is a wooden tri-square, and this beauty was built based on an 18th century French form by André Roubaud. It is quarter sawn beech, made in the shop in about 3 or 4 hours, and is really excellent to use for woodworking. Very lightweight, unlike a metal square. Very easy to true this edge or the stock in case it ever goes out of true because of changes in humidity or because you drop it, something very difficult to fix with a metal square. And also it's very easy on the eyes. I really like the curves here on the blade and on the butt. A lot of woodworkers think that these were perhaps molding shapes that craftsmen used to lay out on the end of their stock. I think they just look nice, but either way, build yourself a nice wooden tri-square. The next wooden tool to make for yourself is a wooden straight edge. And wooden straight edges are much lighter than a metal straight edge, and they are much less expensive. There is absolutely no need for you to send $300 or $400 to the good people at Starrett in Athol, Massachusetts for a metal straight edge that it will very easily go out of true if you drop it or if you store it improperly. Wooden straight edges are perfectly suited for woodworking. I make my wooden straight edges out of exotics. Usually I don't use exotic woods in my woodworking, but for some marking and measuring tools I make an exception. This is made from a wood called red heart, which is an exotic that is very dimensionally stable and actually works a lot more like metal than wood. That's how hard it is. The design of a wooden straight edge is pretty important. You'll notice that it has only one straight edge. That means you only have to maintain one edge, and if you're ever worried your straight edge is out of true, you'll always know where to look. There's only this edge. The other thing is it has this curve here along its length, and the curve does two things. One, it tells me this isn't the straight edge, which is good, and it also exposes end grain all along the length of the straight edge, which helps keep the straight edge dimensionally stable. Winding sticks. You do need winding sticks, but they do not need to be fancy like these winding sticks. Your winding sticks can be as simple as 2 pieces of wood that you pick up off the floor. As long as the edges are parallel, they don't even have to be the same width, but as long as they're parallel, they can be used on a panel or on a board for discerning twist. I, however, have built these dress winding sticks from Red Heart with an inlay of maple along here to make it easy to sight across the two. And I travel with these, and they are used to impress people, but they're also very compact. So you need winding sticks, but they don't need to be fancy at all. Let's talk about some of the striking and fastening tools that are in your toolkit. And some people might think that this is just crap you can pick up from the home center because after all, it's like descended from the rock. But actually, there's a lot to consider. This is a blue spruce chisel mallet with a 16-ounce head and a very traditional turned shape. But what's key about it is that the head is resin impregnated, which makes it almost impervious to damage. You can hit dovetails all day, all week, all month, all year, and you'll see almost no damage on the head. Very nice, weighted, very nicely shaped. The only weak point is the handle. Can sometimes get cracked if you do hit it a lot. The steel stem has caused some cracks on this one. I got a replacement handle, not a big deal. Still my favorite mallet of all time. Also, I think you should have a dead blow mallet. It makes assemblies a lot easier. This is a rubber dead blow mallet from the Champagne Corporation, and as we know, Champagne comes from Champagne, but this is actually from Taiwan. Rubber filled with, the head is filled with sand, and that gives it some extra oomph when you hit your assemblies. Very useful to have, very inexpensive, $12, $15, you should get one. The only modification is it's going to have this plastic seam all around it, and if you don't kind of sand off or cut off that plastic seam, whenever you hit your work, it's going to leave a little dent there. So that's the little modification. Let's talk about hammers. I think woodworkers need two hammers really to do about 99% of the work. One is a cross-peen hammer. This is just a vintage cross-peen hammer that I adore. You can get these on eBay all day long. A very common hammer, very lightweight head, 6-7 ounces maybe at most. The peen, this end, is really useful for starting tacks between your fingers. And also this is the end that I will use for tapping irons inside molding planes, especially trying to tap them up against the back of the escapement. And it has all sorts of other little uses. Little hammer, very useful. Your main hammer, though, is going to be a 16-ounce claw hammer, and this is a True Temper made in the 1970s. True Temper is a great brand, but there are lots of really good 16-ounce head hammers out there. You just want to make sure that it has a claw shape so that you can pull nails out, and I really like the octagonal shaped handle, and because it's an octagon, I always feel like it registers a lot more nicely in my hand, and I can always feel by holding it and know exactly where the head is at all times. I think it makes it more accurate for me. So get a wooden handled hammer. Don't get a fiberglass or metal handle hammer. Those are junk. You have to have nailing accessories, otherwise your projects are going to just be all like porcupines. So let's talk first about nail sets. And it's not like they come in a set, it's that they set the nail. And I think everybody needs about 3 nail sets if they want to make furniture. One of them is the 1/32 nail set, which has a 1/32 tip, which is really good for finishing nails. The other one is the 3/32 set, has a 3/32 tip. You'll also notice, or maybe you won't, but you can see on a good set that this has a little depression on the inside, which makes it sit on a larger nail really, really nicely. And then the third nail set is one that you make yourself. And this is a punch that I purchased from Sears. It must have been $2. And I have filed or ground the edge, so the tip here, so it's square. And having a square tip for your square head nails is really, really nice. It makes the correct shaped hole when you set it below the surface, and it also sticks to the top of the nail a lot better. Of course, you're going to make mistakes when you pull nails, and so you need pinchers. Some people call these nippers. I've never found a set of pinchers that are particularly good or particularly bad. These are just home center pinchers. They're big ones for big nails, and this little set for little brads. What's important about them are the jaws, is that the jaws need to close tight all the way along with no gaps, and need to be able to close tightly with only very little pressure back here at the handle. I'd love to find some great pinchers, but it doesn't really matter because these kind of low quality pinchers seem to work just fine. But get yourself a couple pairs. It's much easier to pull a nail out with these than it is with the claw on your hammer. Let's talk about screw driving. I build reproduction furniture for the most part, and so I only use screws with slotted heads. I don't like Phillips screws. I don't like Torx screws. I don't like Posi-Drive screws. I think they look ugly on reproduction furniture. So I need a set of straight drivers. Really, you only need a couple straight drivers to do most of your work. This is a number 1 driver, which has basically a 3/16 inch head, and then there's a 1/4 inch one for large screws, and then this guy, which does like 10s and 12s and 14s. Most of your work is going to be for hardware is going to be with the number 1 driver. What's key about these? And these are these German-made SKG, which are metric, but they work great anyway. They're from Garrett Wade and are as good a screwdriver as you can find. But the tips are unplated, and that's generally a sign of a good screwdriver, is that they haven't tried to plate the tip and they've precision ground that so it fits the screw just right. Now, what I'm not particularly wild about is that these are tapered all the way to the tip, and so it only contacts the screw right up at the top of the screw. I would rather this be, the edges be parallel all the way down, but beggars can't be choosers. The other nice thing about the SKGs is they have this little wrench area that you can grab with a wrench if you need some extra torque, and they have wooden handles. I hate plastic handles, so having a nice wooden handle is a pleasant thing. So the SKGs are a fine screwdriver. The other thing is, you know what, even though I said that I hate Phillips screws and everything, is that I have to drive them sometime, especially in the house. And so you do need a set like this, and this is a Hitachi set that you can get almost anywhere at the home center, that has, you know, Phillips 0, 1, 2, and 3, and it also even has some Robertson heads, and it even has a straight head, which is pretty useless in a drill. But you do need these for doing the work around the house, and so you know, pick up one of these and throw it in the tool chest, but don't you know, don't want anyone else see it. Let's talk about my cordless drills in my chest. And I don't know what the voltage of the human body is. I think it's less than a volt, but these don't run out of steam like my 18-volt tools do. This is a Fray 10-inch brace, and I just love this for so many reasons. And number one is its simplicity and its weight. It has the simplest chuck that will hold almost any square tanged tapered bit. Locks down securely, and then the bit is just part of the whole frame. It feels like they were, you know, made together. There is no ratcheting mechanism here on the end of the chuck, and that's what makes the brace really lightweight. I just love it. I love the handle. It has this nice walnut handle with a pewter inlay. It's just gorgeous to look at and to hold. And of course the pad is always gorgeous on the Fray braces, and this one is really tight. Really tight pad that's the key to accurate boring. So these Fray braces are very common, very inexpensive. I probably paid 20 bucks for it, and will be around a lot longer than any of your electric drills. The other drill that I have, and this is called a hand drill, and this is a North Brothers 1530A that has been restored by Victor Cook. And what I love about this is, you know, it's a beautiful piece of work. It's a beautiful piece of woodwork and restoration metal work. The gears are great. It has all sorts of different settings on it so that you can, you know, drill forward, drill backwards, drill only forward, drill, you know, it ratchets, it does everything but mow the lawn. Hand drills will only do up to a 1/4 inch bit. And so this is 1/4 inch down to 1/16 or a 32nd, and the jaws of this close really tight so I can get the wire bits in. Really love that. And then this handles everything from 1/4 inch on up to an inch or even bigger, depending on what kind of brute you are. So these two drills are the drills of the furniture maker. There are other drills, but these are the only two that you need. Let's talk about some of the bits that you need for furniture making. If you're going to use screws, you're going to need to countersink them occasionally. This is a Stanley countersink bit that I purchased at the home center. It doesn't work so well. I'm not really crazy about it, but I don't really care because I don't have screws showing on the outside of my project all that much. It leaves a rough surface. It leaves a pretty clean hole, but it has a screw that goes into it, and it might be on the back of a case. You need one, but it doesn't have to be a super nice one. However, you do need a nice set of brad points, and these are used in your hand drill, and it can be used in some braces. This is the Lee Valley set, and this is the best set of brad points that I've ever laid eyes on. What Lee Valley does is they take these nice machinist twist bits, and then they remanufacture them. They grind these spurs and this new needle tip on it. Super sharp, perfectly formed so that it scores a beautiful hole, and the flutes are really nice and eject the chips. You don't need a lot of these, and thank goodness, because they're so expensive. You know, a set of 7 will get you done. It'll set you back about 40 or 50 bucks, but it'll be the last brad point set that you ever buy. So buy nice and buy once. The other thing you need to buy, and you can't buy new, is you need auger bits. Auger bits go in your brace, and these go anywhere from 1/4 inch up to an inch. With auger bits, there are Jennings bit peoples and there are Irwin bit people. I am an Irwin bit person, and the reason I prefer these Irwin bits is because they don't clog. These wide open flutes will clear the material really easily. The downside to these is you don't have a lot of the extra walls that the Jennings bits has. The Jennings bits has these really tight spirals, and that makes them really accurate, but it also is what makes them clog. So you can go either way with it, but I think Irwin bits are the way to go. A set like this, a set of 13, is going to set you back about 60 bucks. Or you can pick them up onesie twosie for about a quarter each at the flea market. A box is a nice place to store them. It's a good thing to have, and so I paid a little bit extra for it. More tools for making holes and more tools for filling holes. This is a bird cage awl, furniture maker's friend. This is from Check Edge, company down in Georgia. Excellent piece of kit. What's different about a birdcage awl from a brad awl or from a scratch awl is that it has this four-sided tip. And this four-sided tip turns it into a boring tool. Well, if I take this and I bore into my saw bench, it would remove sawdust. It doesn't just push the fibers aside, it actually bores through the material. So this is a great tool for making starter holes for screws or for brads. Very nice tool. These other two tools are for skinning dowels so that they are the perfect dimension. This is a dowel skinner that I made a long time ago. It is from some 1/4-inch steel plate, and it just has holes drilled on the drill press for the sizes that are common in our shop. And you can take either commercial dowels or dowels that you have rived yourself and drive them through these holes and produce dimensionally perfect stock, which is a real big advantage. There are commercial dowel plates. This is a Lie-Nielsen, and it has the advantage of two things. One, it has the sizes marked on it, which is nice. The second thing, though, that's more important is that the holes are tapered. So this is relieved under here and tight up here. So when you drive your dowel into the hole, and it won't get stuck in that hole because it's only touching here at the top. It'll pop out at the end. Very nice advantage over this one where the dowel will grab and you have to kind of wrench it out. However, this was free with scrap from our shop, and this cost a little money. You've got to have chisels, but you don't have to have as many as I do. These are Lie-Nielsen bevel edge chisels. They're based on the Stanley 750 pattern, and I have them sized all the way from 1 inch down to, it looks like, 1/8 here. And these chisels are available in a couple different steels. You can get them in A2 steel, or you can get them in O1 steel, a traditional high carbon steel. These are A2. I don't really care either way. I probably prefer the O1 because they're easier to sharpen. Some people prefer A2, and you can go either way. What is important, however, is that the chisels have a very narrow edge here, so that I can get these in between dovetails and not blemish my tail portion of them. Plus the Lie-Nielsens, unlike every other chisel I've ever used, come dead flat from the factory. I can set up this whole roll of chisels from the factory in about 30 minutes, and time is worth something to me. The other thing is the chisels are really lightweight, and lightweight chisels are nice. Plastic handled chisels are very top heavy up here, and if you hold the chisel like a pencil, you'll really start to feel it if it's a very weighty chisel. So this is a nice lightweight, can be held easily for paring, is comfortable, or is comfortable for chopping. Beautifully made, beautifully executed with horn beam handles that you can just knock the snot out of. I've only destroyed one in all my years, and really just highly recommend them. You need Mortise chisel, and you can go a couple different ways with it. It really depends on your personal preference. This is a sash mortising chisel from Lee Nielsen and has all the attributes of the bevel edge chisel, in that it's made from hornbeam and is nicely balanced and is flat from the factory and all that. But it is a very lightweight chisel, and a lightweight chisel is great for a bevel edge chisel, not so great for a mortise chisel where you want mass so you can really beaver through the work. And that is where you get the Ray Isles chisels come in. So these are English made, and this is a traditional English mortising chisel. Very traditional, knife-like shape, beech handle that's tapered, and very important, it has this oval cross section so that I always know when I grab the tool if the bevel is facing forward or back. And so that is really handy when you are doing mortises in your styles. What I am not particularly wild about with these chisels is that the handle is very fragile. This will split. It's a tang chisel, so there's a metal rod that comes up here. And if the grain runs out even a little bit on the handle, after a certain amount of abuse, the handle will split off. Of course, you're a woodworker and you can replace it, and I have. So it's not all that big a deal, but it is an inconvenience when you're in the middle of the project and you have split the handle of your chisel. These socket chisels generally don't split as easily as the tang chisels because you're driving it into the socket and not trying to split it over a tang. Start out with just a 1/4 inch mortising chisel, whichever way you go, with socket or with tang chisels. Don't buy a whole set. That's kind of a false economy. A 1/4 inch mortising chisel does about 90% of the work in furniture, and then buy a 5/16 or a 1/2 inch when you really need it. So get a 1/4 inch and call it a day. A lot of people think of spoke shave as a tool for a wheelwright, but I think it's an invaluable furniture maker's tool. If you do cabriole legs, if you do anything with tapers or curves, spoke shave is a great friend to have. And the best spoke shave out there is, without a doubt, the Veritas. This is based on the Stanley 151, and it is just perfect. One of the things I really like about it, it has the independent wheels for adjusting the blade, and it makes it simple to adjust the blade so it's stronger on one side and takes a lighter cut on the other side. Really valuable for chair making, so you can take a heavy cut and a light cut all with one tool setup. And this 151 style mechanism really does it. Very inexpensive. The only downside to the tool is I think that the mouth comes a little tight from the factory. So you might have to file that open a little bit, but that's better than two open. Other than that, it's a great tool for the money, and well worth buying, especially compared to some of the vintage and Indian junk out there. You could spend every dollar you make buying all the rasps that are out there, but I think furniture makers really will need only 3 unless they do a lot of shaped work. The 3 most important rasps are the cabinet rasp, and this is an RU, a French company, and an RU cabinet rasp about 9 inches long with a hand stitched, so each one of these teeth was punched out by hand by a Frenchman. And it has a 9 grain, and these are graded from 1 to 15. So a 9 is, it's a little finer, but it does remove material really quickly. You can't beat these for the smooth cut and a quick stock removal. Really worth the money. The other rasp you need is a modeler's rasp. This is also an RU. And it's about 6 inches long. It has a half round profile, just like the cabinet rasp. So it's round on this side and flat on this side. And this one is a 15 grain. So it's the finest grain that RU makes. Leaves a beautiful surface. Nothing like what you think a rasp would leave. You think for a rough toothed surface, this doesn't leave that behind. Very good shape for fine details. The other rasp that a lot of people use, including myself, is the rat tail rasp. This is great for coping, molding, for getting into round shapes. This is a Nicholson Believe it or not, Nicholson still makes decent rat tail rasps because I think high-end carpenters still need them. So Nicholson provides. Other Nicholson rasps and files, not so good. But the rat tail is good, and I bought this from a home center and fixed it with a simple screws-on file handle. And this is kind of what they call a medium rasp, and it is really handy to have for round shapes. So get your 3 rasps, start working with them, and then figure out if you need any more. You got to have a cabinet scraper. They're so cheap, they're so useful, they get you out of so many scrapes. But this is the Sandvik, and Sandvik used to make the best cabinet scrapers. Now these are getting kind of hard to find. Swedish steel, look for the sign of the fish. What makes the Sandvik really nice is it has good steel. It's hard, but it's ductile, which means it can be worked. But it's these surfaces right here. You see that? That means they were milled flat. So it's much faster to prepare this scraper. It's not all wavy and out of flat. So very nice scraper. If you can't find a Sandvik, 2 Cherries makes a very nice one that has machined edges. Barring that, the Lee Nielsen folks make a nice scraper, but as far as I know, as of now, they don't machine these edges. So get yourself one of these, $9 or $10, and it'll pay for itself the first time you use it. Let's get into the saws. And most woodworkers, their first saw is the Dovetail saw. Now, I wouldn't necessarily recommend that your first saw is the Dovetail saw, but let's deal with it first anyway. My favorite Dovetail saw is this one by Andrew Lunn, who operated under the name Eccentric Toolworks. A very thin plate. It is tapered in width from the heel to the toe, and even the brass back is tapered in width from the heel to the toe. Perfectly balanced. The handle is perfectly suited for my particular mitt. 15 points, filed rip, hand sharpened, perfect in every way. However, no longer available. Andrew doesn't make these anymore, and so I don't want to leave you hanging. I would rather light a candle than curse your darkness. My second choice would be the Lee Nielsen. And the Lee Nielsen saw is just perfect in every way for so many people. Its handle fits the vast majority of the population at large. The 15 point per inch tooth line is perfectly suited as a balance between drawer joinery and carcass joinery. It has nice weight. It's beautiful, and it's priced very well. So you can go with this saw, and your choice really comes down to whether you want it in the full plate thickness or the thin plate thickness. I prefer the thin plate just because it removes less material, so it's easier to move through the wood. But if you are a new sawyer, I think you should stick with the full standard plate thickness, so you're less likely to kink it. So get a Dovetail saw. It might not be your first, it might not be your last, but you do need to start somewhere with them. The saw I use the most is the Carcass saw. This is a 16-inch long blade with about 3 1/4 under the spine, filed crosscut at 14 points per inch. This is a vintage model. This is a Wheeler Madden and Clemson saw, just one of the finest handsaw makers in the United States of the 19th and early 20th centuries. Applewood handle, the hang is absolutely perfect so that my force is pointed to a place that gives me a nice balance between aggression and smooth cutting. There are lots of great vintage Carcass saws out there, so it's worth taking a little time. If you don't want to shop for a vintage Carcass saw, the Tools for Working Wood Carcass saw, the Gramercy, is just probably the best Carcass saw that it's being made in modern times, so I'd go for that one. But I really like the longer length of the Wheeler Madden and Clemson, and the sort of vintage and American details like the steel back. Let's talk about Tenon saws. I want to give you a couple options because there seems to be a lot of personal preference with this tool. A lot of the students I teach prefer this format of tool. This is a Wenslaufen Sons sash saw, which is 16 inches long from the toe to the heel, filed 10 points per inch, rip, with about 3 5/8 underneath the blade. It is a good combination of fast and smooth and very easy to control. A lot of students asked to buy this saw off of me during class. My favorite Tenon saw, however, is this Wenslaufen Sons Tenon saw, also from the Kenyon saw collection, like that one. This one is 19 inches long from the toe to the heel, also filed 10 points and filed rip, but it has a lot more blade underneath the spine here. I really like the large size of this Tenon saw because I feel that the brass back up in the air really allows me to find that moment of inertia, which is where the saw is completely vertical, and that's really critical when cutting a tenon. So this is a lot more fragile than that one, but I think this one is a lot more accurate, and for me, that makes it all worthwhile. When you get into the larger saws for furniture making, most furniture makers choose a panel saw instead of a full-size handsaw. What's the difference? Well, not a lot. They have basically the same form, but the blade is shorter. A full-size handsaw is going to be 26 inches from toe to heel, whereas a panel saw is going to be more like 20 from toe to heel. And the smaller size is more suited for a shop, and it fits more easily in your toolbox. This is the Lie-Nielsen panel saw, and I really like these. There are a lot of good panel saws out there, but this one is very well made and is taper ground, which is a key point with saws that don't have a back. And what that means by taper ground is that the saw is thickest at the tooth line, and then the saw plate is reduced in its thickness as you move up the plate. And that means you don't have to use as much set on the teeth, and that the saw moves more easily through the work. I think you need 3 panel saws to do about 99% of the work. Heck, you could probably get by with 2, but here's what I have. I have a Lie-Nielsen 7-point rip panel saw that I use for a lot of short furniture rips. However, most of my work with panel saws is done with this one. This is an 8-point crosscut saw, and this is what I use for knocking down rough stock when it comes from the lumber yard, or for when making kind of rough cuts, when I'm trying to get my stock down to within a 1/4 inch, within 1/8 of an inch, not my finished cut, but it is very fast. If I want to make a finished cut on, say, a tabletop, then I'm going to use this 12-point saw, and it's also filed crosscut, also taper ground like all the panel saws. The Lie-Nielsen saws are very well hung and very comfortable for a wide variety of hands, so you can't go wrong with those. Very nice traditional shape too. Here are 2 critical specialty saws. Number 1 is a saw you're probably familiar with. This is a coping saw. Well, this isn't just any coping saw. This is the Miller's Falls 042 coping saw. Probably the best coping saw ever made. And I say that because its frame is so robust that it can tension the blade effectively. And the other thing is its adjustment mechanisms are so robust that they can hold the blade in any setting. So you can cock the blade a little bit as you're scooping out your dovetail waste or you're making curve cuts. Excellent saw, available on the vintage market, and definitely worth looking for. The other specialty saw is a flush cut saw. There are tons of flush cut saws out there. This is the Lee Valley flush cut saw that they sell through its catalog up in Canada, and I haven't found one that I like more than this. Quite inexpensive, about $25, and its big advantage over its competitors is that it actually works. A lot of flush cut saws even though they say they don't have any set on the teeth, meaning that the teeth are bent up and down, most of those saws are made by people who are liars or just mistaken. And so when they punch out the teeth on the machine, they're all set to one side. So you may put the saw flat on the work, and on this side it may work fine. Flip it over, this side will scratch your work. This saw, however, is made correctly and does not mar your work either way. Great saw for cutting tenons and the other little proud bits flush to your work, and well worth the money. This next recommendation is going to surprise some of you who have known me for many years. I have recently decided to switch back to oil stones. I started with oil stones, moved into water stones, and I am now kind of transitioning back to oil stones. These are natural oil stones that were quarried down near where I grew up in Percy, Arkansas, from the Best Company, sharpening stone company down there. Gorgeous looking stones. They cut quite fast and really do the job for woodworking. Porous stones just need a little bit of oil to do the job. And we have here the soft Arkansas stones down here, which these are generally used for, this one will remove the old edge and refresh an edge. And then the hard Arkansas, this is just a standard hard Arkansas. This is black Arkansas, which is a little finer. You can choose one of these, or you can even go to the translucent Arkansas for polishing. It really depends on how fine an edge you require. So you need this to get a new edge, and then you need to choose what level of insane polish you want. And that's really personal preference. I have all of them, mostly just because, you know, go Razorbacks. When it comes to sharpening equipment, you definitely need a grinder. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to renew any edges that have been overhoned or that have been damaged if you hit a nail or some other hard bit of wood. When it comes to grinders, I think you have two choices that are quite valid. I prefer my hand-cranked grinder, very inexpensive. You can find these for $20 on eBay, and they are everywhere. Companies made millions of them because they were a cheap way to hone your scissors or knives or any tools around the farm. And they work surprisingly well with modern grinding wheels. I use the Norton 3X grinding wheels on all my grinders, even the hand crank grind ones. So look for one of these, or if you don't like the hand crank variety, you can get a powered grinder, an electric dry grinder, as a lot of people call them. These can be found very inexpensively on the new market, and they suck. Or you can buy a used one made in the United States at a garage sale for about $20, and it will last you and your kids for, you know, generations and generations. I definitely recommend an old vintage grinder, but put some new wheels on it. Put a Norton 3X 80 grit or 100 grit wheel on it, and it'll be like a new machine. So definitely get a grinder. Now there are some other woodworking sharpening accessories that you need to take a look at here that I have arrayed on the saw bench. If you're going to use water stones, and I'm fine with using water stones, my favorite accessory is this plant mister that you can get at any garden store for about 10 bucks. It pumps up, and then it'll squirt for a long time using the trigger, and you won't get that hand fatigue from pumping the Windex bottle, you cheap wiener. The other thing you need if you use oil stones is you need some place to put your oil. These little bottles are fine, but they leak, and oil pools up on the top, and then it leaks down the side, and it makes a big mess. I'm already making a mess here. Go to the antique store or go to eBay and get yourself a nice little oiler. These things are great, and they don't make a mess. You just put oil in them and then a couple pumps, and it puts oil exactly where you want it. You can buy them in all sizes, very inexpensive, and cool too. If you're going to sharpen your scrapers, you're going to need a burnisher. Don't be an idiot and try to use the back of a chisel, a gouge, or a screwdriver to turn the hook over on your card scraper, because card scrapers are harder now than they used to be. And so it really will serve you better to get a carbide burnisher like this one. This is the Arno, which is a French-made one. I bought this from Lee Nielsen Toolworks, but you can get it almost anywhere. And its number one great super feature is that the carbide rod here is really polished smooth. It turns a very smooth burr, and this is super hard. It's like Rockwell hardness 90, and so it turns over that burr really quickly and easily. And there's also a sharp side over here that I don't use because it's just too aggressive. Also, if you use oil stones, I'd recommend you buy some thick leather that you can use as a strop. Also good just for doing profiled iron, so you can bend it to whatever shape, inside or out, for your gouges or your hollows or your rounds or your molding profiles. And you just take this thick tanned leather and you charge it with some 1 micron charging compound. I really like the Lee Valley, which is sub 1 micron. And leaves a really beautiful polish and can even renew an edge on a molding plane so you don't have to go back to the stones again. Strops are your friend. So those are the tools that I've chosen to put in my version of the Anarchist tool chest. And on this DVD, I'm sure you picked up a lot of information about the particular brands that I like when I chose my particular set of tools. But what I hope you've also picked up during our conversation is that all of the tools in the basic set fit very comfortably inside a traditionally sized tool chest. And that's an important point because the brand names, they change. Whether you bought the tools in 1678 or whether you bought them in 2011, very different brand name tools, but they're still the same basic set that you need to build furniture. The set doesn't change, but the names of the tools might. And once you understand that and you pick the right set of tools, then the next logical step is for you to build the right size tool chest to hold all the tools that you need to build excellent furniture.